think this goes without saying, but yeah, we're talking about the ending, so there will be spoilers. Major spoilers in this video. So, the ending to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is controversial, which was to be expected as the ending to 7 Remake was also controversial. It's a common belief that they ruined Aerith's death in this game. They bogged the ending down with so many questions left unanswered, and many mind-boggling moments that her death felt inconsequential compared to the mystery they're obviously trying to build for Part 3. And that's of course sacrilege. How could Square Enix possibly get the most important aspect of Final Fantasy VII wrong? Or have they gotten it wrong? I can't speak for everybody, but I sort of went through stages after finishing the game. The first is confusion. What the hell just happened? I definitely had similar thoughts about the fact that they kind of robbed us of Aerith's death in many ways, but I was more just conflicted because they threw so much shit at us that I wasn't sure I really understood what actually even happened. So then I started to analyze it and think about it some more, and so then I reached the second stage, which is clarity. I started to piece together a lot of what happened and thought I understood what occurred. Then I started to notice other shit, and I started to question again whether I actually truly understood the ending, and after that I reached the end stage. What is that stage? Well, we'll get there. So what are people confused about with this ending? Well, a lot. Some of the things include, is Aerith actually dead? How come Cloud can see her but others can't? What the hell is Sephiroth actually trying to do? What are all these worlds for? What is the rift in the sky? How come Cloud can see it and also others can't? Why does he have both the black and white materia at the end? Why didn't we get to see Cloud place Aerith in the lake at the end? What in the actual fuck was Square Enix thinking and skipping over that? Did it even happen? Confluence of worlds? What the hell is this marking on Aerith's wrist? And these things are part of the reason many people dislike the story overall in this remake trilogy. People can't stand the whispers, the alternate timelines, and they can't fathom Zack's inclusion in the story. And some people like that they're expanding on the characters and lore, but feel like they've gone too far with this whole fate concept being intertwined into the story, and that it's somehow changed the meaning of Final Fantasy VII itself and the very core themes it presented. I would say that I actually disagree with those people, but it's understandable why they are dismayed by all of these things. And I think that by the end of this video, your concerns will hopefully be alleviated, as I'm going to explain why Square Enix would take the story in this direction and why I think we're actually headed in the right direction for Part 3, as much as it may seem to you that we're not. We're also going to discuss some of my theories as to what is happening, especially in regards to Cloud being a complete badass in Part 3. So, what do we know from this ending? Well, Sephiroth did a lot of talking, and he actually revealed quite a bit of information about his plan. Do we know everything? Not really, but we know a lot more than we did know. So the first thing that we know is that Sephiroth wants to, of course, take over the planet, like literally any villain in any JRPG. The way that he intends to do that is by unmaking the planet. Sephiroth explains that in the planet's embrace, all life is as one.
The planet's embrace. All life is as one.
And all born are bound to her.
All born are bound to her.
Then he says, should this world be unmade, so too shall her children.
Should this world be unmade, so too shall her children.
He's not directly telling Cloud he wants to unmake the world, but why else would he tell them this if not for that reason? Sounds like evil villain speak, if you ask me. So the next question is, how is he going to unmake the planet? Well, in order to explain that, we need to talk about worlds. Sephiroth explains that when the boundaries of fate are breached, new worlds are born.
When the boundaries of fate are breached, new worlds are born.
This was demonstrated at the end of Remake when Zack appears to be alive. That wasn't supposed to be his fate, as we know from the original game, and because the Whispers failed to maintain that fate, it created a new world. We know this because of this close-up of Stamp is of a different breed of dog, and it seems like this is happening all the time within the planet. The game demonstrates this prior to this scene with Sephiroth. Aerith appears to take you on a date in what is clearly a different timeline because this Stamp figurine is of a different breed of dog than either of the other two. Further into this sequence, we see several different breeds of dogs representing Stamp, and at this point we know of 6 different worlds that they are focused on, and the developers have confirmed in the Ultimania that there are in fact 6 different worlds, but my theory is that there is actually a 7th world because it's, well, Final Fantasy VII. Mind you, this isn't the total number of worlds the planet has. There are an infinite amount of worlds, but I believe that there is a purpose to them focusing on 7 worlds. But we'll touch more on that later. In this sequence, we see what looks like a vision of a world that then gets destroyed, and the planet then makes a sound. Sephiroth doesn't appear to be fazed by it and calls it the Rapture, but Cloud is disturbed by it and describes it as the planet screaming. This indicates that, of course, the planet is in pain. It's effectively hurting the planet whenever one of these worlds die. And the Rapture, as far as I understand, is a Christian concept referring to an event that marks the end of time, where Christian believers will be resurrected to meet the Lord. It's a bit unclear as to whether he believes that he is the Lord, or if he's referring to Jenova as the Lord. Understanding this part now actually gives me a bit of a chill when watching it again. It's quite sinister. Sephiroth is taking pleasure in making the planet cry out in pain.
To her ecstatic cries, her rapture.
Screaming! It's screaming!
He likely believes that this is for the greater good, but of course, we know it's not. So my interpretation is that this is at least a part of how he's going to unmake the planet, is by leading all of these worlds to their slaughter in some way, and the more that he can defy fate, the more worlds that can be created for him to destroy. What gets in his way, however, are the Whispers, or Arbiters of Fate. This is why he needs to control them. And my current theory is that the way he's able to control them is through Jenova's power. We know that Jenova can manipulate/imitate beings, so my guess is he's using Jenova's power to take control of the Whispers. How this works exactly, I'm not entirely sure, and I don't think we have enough information yet to say. The point is, the more the Whispers are controlled, the more Sephiroth can redirect fate. The more he can redirect fate, the more worlds are created. The more worlds that are created, the higher the potential for more worlds dying, causing damage to the planet. The more rapidly he can damage the planet, the less time the planet has to recover, thus weakening the planet to a point that it unmakes it, leaving it vulnerable for him to control. Again, some of this is my speculation, so let me know in the comments below if you think it's sound. Now, you'll hear Sephiroth say multiple times that he desires to harness negative emotions, things like rage, sorrow, loss, etc. This is obviously part of his grand plan. My personal take is that this harnessing of negative emotion is what allows Jenova to awaken, or rather, her essence scattered across the planet can awaken. And we know that when the Cetra sealed her away, this is what they did, as revealed in this line: "When our adversaries' scattered malignancy shall converge to plague the planet once more." In this case, the planet now means all of the different worlds as well. Now, the other thing Sephiroth mentions is the confluence of worlds. Am I the only one who didn't know what that word meant? Sephiroth be using some big-ass words here. Guess all that reading taught him some high-level vocabulary.
Excavated from a 2,000-year-old rock layer, a life form in stasis.
I felt somewhat embarrassed that I had to look it up, but in case you were like me and didn't know, it basically just means merging. Like my mom always says, learn something new every day. He's essentially talking about the merging of worlds, or in other words, the reunion. Now, in the original Final Fantasy VII, the reunion referred to the reuniting of Jenova cells to form the main body of Jenova, and that's still basically what it means here. It just has extra depth to it now, as Jenova's essence is scattered across multiple worlds. When Sephiroth refers to the reunion, he means the merging of worlds, but the merging of worlds means that that Genova's main body can be truly awakened. It's basically one and the same, but there's also another reason he might want to merge all of the worlds together. This next part is something you might not have picked up on. In order to understand his motive, you need to understand the black materia. Here, Sephiroth says something very important. He says, in reference to the black materia, this is the key, which grants access to the true counterpart hidden between worlds.
This is the key, which grants access to the true counterpart hidden between worlds.
This means that the black materia that they picked up was in fact sort of a fake, as Aerith said.
Besides, there's no point fighting over a fake.
But also not entirely. Sephiroth, with this one line, basically confirmed that it's this black materia that either reveals the location of the true black materia or unlocks the true black materia, which was hidden between all the worlds, likely somewhere in the life stream. Which means there's only one true black materia. So I suspect that the reason he wants to merge the worlds together is because he can only summon Meteor once, since there's only one true black materia. So if all the worlds are merged together, then this means that he can effectively wipe them all out at once, which will cause so much destruction to the planet that it will unmake the planet, allowing him to reign supreme. And if you pay close attention, this is why he takes the black materia and then it disappears. Then he makes a new one which drops afterward. It appears as though he tapped into the Whisper's abilities in some way to find the location of the true black materia. This new one is likely the true black materia. So, we've talked about Sephiroth's plan, but how about Aerith's death? You can see here that when Sephiroth comes down to stab Aerith, Cloud deflects this strike and saves Aerith, or so it seems. Then the camera cuts, and all of a sudden she dies, and there's blood on Sephiroth's sword, whereas in the previous cut, there wasn't. We also know that afterwards Cloud can seemingly see Aerith, but none of the other characters can. So the question is, did she actually die? Yes. And also, no. Before we discuss her death, we need to talk about our boy Cloud first and how key he actually is to the story going forward, and how I believe he's going to be at the end of the Temple of Ancient sequence. Cloud falls into the depths below with Aerith. The game then transitions to a sequence where Cloud is woken up by Aerith from a wheelchair, where you'll recall he was unconscious previously in Zack's world at Elmira's. This is very important, by the way. Aerith calls this her dream world. She proceeds to take him out on a date. She also advises Cloud not to look up. Despite her advice, Cloud looks up anyway and finds to be what I would call a rift in the sky. It's clear from some of the dialogue from the NPCs that the world appears to be coming to an end. So while it's not 100% confirmed, it's very likely that the rift indicates that the world is fading out of existence, dying, or as Sephiroth would call it, a homecoming, or even the rapture. You'll also recall that in Zack's world, they also claimed the world was ending as well, and it also had the same rift in the sky. But really the point I'm trying to make here is that Cloud was actually able to traverse into another world. The only other characters that can do this are seemingly the Cetra like Aerith and Sephiroth. This is likely because they can communicate with the planet, and naturally this means the life stream as well. All the other characters are either dead or they are a separate instance of themselves with a separate conscience. And that's the important key: consciousness. You see, there's a reason that I believe the developers chose to breach fate at the moment when Zack is supposed to die. At that moment, Cloud is unconscious, primarily because he was just experimented on and has lost memories. Many of his memories are in flux and stuck inside the life stream. I believe that this sort of created a glitch in the system, so to speak. You see, when a new world is created, it likely creates a copy of the character along with their memories, but because Cloud's memories were already in flux, it copied his body, but it glitched out and couldn't copy his memories, therefore keeping him stuck in a permanent unconscious state, or so it seems. Basically, his body was copied, but his mind and bodies are empty. This essentially means that there are multiple copies of Cloud across multiple worlds, but devoid of consciousness. This is how the planet can accept his transference from one world to another, is because in those other worlds where he is unconscious, the planet is still waiting for his memories to arrive to bring him to consciousness again. What better way to do this than to take the Cloud from one world where he is conscious and fill it in. This allows him to connect to different worlds, but with one conscious. So, getting back to Aerith's death. The scene when we see Cloud deflect Sephiroth's strike appears to be covered in this rainbow light illumination effect, or however you want to describe it. Now, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what this effect means, but it seems to be used either when Aerith is involved in some way, or it's used to indicate something related to the worlds. My guess is that in this instance, a new world was created at this exact moment. This is likely the 7th world, because once the scene makes a cut, that illumination effect is gone, and that's when we see Aerith fall, as well as blood appearing on Sephiroth's blade. This means that she's both alive and dead. It seems likely that Sephiroth killed her in all of the worlds, except this new one that was created. So she's probably only alive in one world. So this then begs the question, how come Cloud can see her at the end, but nobody else can? This is because Cloud right now is, well, beyond fucked up. He only has one conscious, but is tied to 7 different worlds all at the same time. However, I don't think he's exactly aware of this power he has, nor does he know how to master it yet. At one point, Aerith, or Omni-Aerith as a lot of people are describing her, which while I don't actually think exists, the term Omni is probably the most fitting word in my opinion, which that's another thing we're going to talk about later. But anyway, she tells Cloud to focus on himself, the real version of himself. That's what she's hoping he can do. This all makes perfect sense if you think about what is supposed to happen in Part 3, the reunion, or merging of worlds, and simultaneously the restoring of Jenova hasn't happened yet. And as I mentioned earlier, Jenova is scattered across the worlds now, so if the main body forms, it means essentially the same thing as the merging of worlds. But when it does happen, Cloud is supposed to go into a coma. Why? Because all of the worlds are merging and all 7 versions of Cloud are merging with him, and most of them haven't awakened from consciousness yet. So they dominate and take Cloud's mind over, leaving him yet again in an unconscious state. Cloud still hasn't found his true self yet. Now, this also explains why Cloud can see the rift in the sky at the end. Again, in other worlds that Cloud exists in, there is a rift in the sky. His mind is just fucking confused because he hasn't yet mastered his ability to control all the other versions of himself yet. So he's confusing other worlds with this one. So this presents other changes to the story that are likely to occur in Part 3. If Zack is alive in some of these worlds, and they all merge, that likely means Zack will be rejoined with the rest of the party after the reunion. This also means Aerith as well, since Aerith survived in one of the worlds. And this is perfect since Cloud won't be usable in your party for quite some time, so Zack will just take his spot. This also allows Aerith to finally be reunited with Zack. And if you really read the lyrics to No Promises to Keep, that song is pretty much all about her hoping to reunite with a certain somebody, and that somebody is most certainly Zack. So now you're thinking this is stupid because now none of the characters are dead and the theme of loss is eradicated from the story altogether. Not so fast. Remember, there was that emotional scene after Aerith took Cloud on one last date where she said her goodbye to Cloud. Notice she didn't say goodbye to anyone else, just Cloud. That's because she'll get to see the rest of the gang, but when she does, Cloud is going to be in a coma still, and she won't get to see him before he wakes up again. And I suspect that Zack may not either. There will be a new death scene with Aerith and Zack, so this time they can die peacefully together, and this time Zack will actually play a pivotal role in helping to save the planet. So there's a couple of directions that they can take this. Now, they don't need a reason to wake Cloud up beyond the story that was in the original game, given the planet is basically in complete disarray and the weapons are all wreaking havoc, so it would still behoove them to try to wake Cloud up to help them fend off the weapons, but there's an opportunity here to create an even greater incentive to wake Cloud up if both Zack and Aerith die. Well, now they need Cloud to wake up. They can't do it without him. On the other hand, there's another way that's arguably better where they can really reel in the emotions of this scenario. Zack and Aerith could wander off on their own, or quite possibly the whole party splits up in different parts across the planet to try and help in whatever way they can now that the whole planet is in disarray, while Tifa decides to stay in Mideel to try to wake Cloud up from his coma. The live stream sequence is fairly long, even in the original, so this would give them the opportunity to break up this long segment by interjecting each one of the party members' individual segments in between, finally culminating in Cloud restoring his memories and becoming whole again. Afterwards, Cloud and Tifa will probably get picked up by Sid on the Highwind, and they will travel around the planet picking up the rest of the party members again, only to find that both Zack and Aerith have perished. Aerith will likely be the final one, and my guess is she won't actually already be dead, but the party will probably arrive just a tad late, and this is where her real death will occur, meaning that they'll still probably witness her dying. If I am correct in my predictions about this, then this will effectively make Cloud the most... First off, because Zack exists in this world now, when he dies, there will be a second Buster Sword. Remember how he had the twin Buster Sword and having children? Well, this would be the perfect opportunity for him to claim Zack's Buster Sword that he left behind and combine it with his already existing one, still retaining the theme of his living legacy. So Cloud is going to be in a new, improved Cloud, able to combine his two swords together to dish out more damage, but then be able to separate them at will to dual wield like a fucking badass. But it's even more than that. This time, Cloud didn't just restore his memories, he restored his true self. Or rather, selves. That's right. He's 7 different Clouds, all combined into one. Will he have mastered his ability to control all 7 at once immediately after? Nah, they're gonna save that one for the end. Remember how in the original, when you fight Sephiroth one-on-one at the end and Cloud unleashes Omni Slash? Oh yeah. You know what they're planning for this. That's not just a fancy limit break animation, it's actually relevant to the plot now. That's the moment when Cloud masters the ability to control all 7 of himself and becomes Omni Cloud. He then uses all 7 of himself to fuck Sephiroth up the ass with Omni Slash. That's how badass he's going to become before the end of the game. So, it begs the question, why would the devs go so far out of their way to change the story? Why make it so damn complicated? Why couldn't they just go more in depth with some of the parts of the game and keep it mostly the same as the original? Well, there's more than one reason. One of my philosophies that I use in creative work, but really life in general, I guess, is to try to come up with one solution that fixes multiple problems. Or might be more accurate in the creative world to say one idea that serves multiple purposes. Those are often the best ideas. The one new idea that they came up with is really the concept of multiple worlds, and all of the other new ideas are essentially just components of that. Cloud's multiple bodies, the Arbiters of Fate, Zack being alive in some way, Genova's essence is scattered across the planet. It's just that the planet is now multiple worlds, so the scope is just larger this time around. But why this idea? So that requires me to talk about what I think the purposes this idea serves, because that's ultimately how they would have landed on this idea in the first place. This requires some guesswork, but here's what I think. Since they're making this into a trilogy, they really wanted to expand upon the original game. This includes concepts and especially characters that they didn't get to include as much in the original. Most notably, Zack. They wanted to come up with a way to incorporate him into the story more, but it's difficult to do since he dies before the story even begins. And it's even more important because they've turned it into a trilogy. You see, some things translate well, but other times you have to change things around a bit in order for it to be an effective story. It's like translation versus localization. Sometimes it just won't work particularly well to directly translate the events of the original in this new format of 3 games. You have to change a bit in order for it to have the same impact. Imagine playing 2.5 games, totaling over 100 hours of content, only to find out that Cloud's memories are actually that of some random soldier named Zack. Like, it felt like it was thrown in last minute in the original, and by the way, the developers themselves admitted he was pretty much a last minute decision. So now imagine if they treated it the same way in this remake. It would be absolutely terrible scenario plotting if they just did that. They've done the appropriate thing already and introduced him at the end of the first game, so that the moment they reveal that plot twist in part 3, it won't feel like it came completely out of nowhere. When Aerith saves the planet at the end of the game, they don't just want you to assume she uses the life stream in Holy to save the planet, they want to show you how she does it. They want you to see the mechanisms of the planet, and the best way to demonstrate how something works is to break it. Breaking something exposes and enables you to see the individual components that make it work. That's exactly what Sephiroth's goal is. He's, in essence, trying to break the planet, and in doing so, we get to see how the planet actually functions this time. They don't just want Cloud to perform some cool move at the end of the game called Omni Slash. They want there to be meaning behind it, and they want to show you how he is able to perform this feat. The way that they're going to accomplish all of these things, and much more that I'm not going to spend the time to talk about, otherwise this video will drag on forever, is through this world system that they've added to the planet's lore. So then, why would they treat Aerith's death in the way that they did? If my theory is correct and they're going to kill her later, why take away from the moment now? Well, it's hard to say exactly, but I'm feeling somewhat confident that what we're going to get is going to hit harder emotionally, but it's hard to say until I've actually played part 3. But there are definitely some advantages to waiting until Cloud has found his true self through the live stream and recovered his lost memories. The first reason is that it actually has nothing to do with building Aerith's character, but rather Cloud's. They use this opportunity to really give you the impression that he is extremely fucked up. And so if he can't even remember somebody this important to him dying, then his struggle to overcome his own psyche and find his true self will be infinitely more emotional and fulfilling. And this actually makes more sense than it did originally. In the original game, Cloud grows as a character immediately after her death. However, it's not really the right time for it, since he's still supposed to succumb to Sephiroth's control later on when he gives the black materia to Sephiroth, causing the reunion. If he's a strong-willed character after her death, well, it's not completely unbelievable that he could still succumb to Sephiroth's control, but it makes more sense to wait until he has already become stronger mentally through finding his true self and restoring his memories. Then it will be clear that Cloud is strong enough to mentally handle her death. Then it makes sense and is totally in character to see him take charge and respectfully place her in the lake, and it makes more sense for him to give the group a speech to encourage the party to continue moving forward. With his state of mind as it's supposed to be now, it would feel a bit out of character for him to act in such a resolute and defiant manner. The second reason, which is a bit more obvious, comes back to Zack's existence. They want to make it clear that Zack and Aerith have a very strong bond in this game, which was something they didn't quite get across very well in the original game. By delaying her true death, they've enabled a scenario in which Zack can still reunite with her in some way, with the reunion of worlds. And lastly, if her death doesn't occur until after Cloud restores his memories in the live stream, by that point in the game, you essentially know everything that there is to know about her character. You've seen the backstory of her mother in Icicle Inn, and you understand her relationship to Zack. The more you know of her character and her struggles, the more attachment you will have to her character, which will make it even harder to let her go when she dies. But there's an even greater reason why her death would be more tragic after Cloud restores his memories. You see, the more necessary or dependent upon a character, the more tragic their death is. And this is true in real life as well as in fiction. Why is it more tragic to see a parent die, leaving behind a 5-year-old, than it is to see a parent die, leaving behind find a 45-year-old? Well, because you know that the 5-year-old is inherently more dependent on the parent and essentially needs them in order to survive. The 45-year-old is likely independent enough to not need their parent anymore. The reason that Aerith's death would be more tragic at this point in the story is because, well, the planet is in fucking absolute chaos. Sephiroth is back, Jenova is back, there's a goddamn meteor in the sky that's about to cause a fucking calamity if they don't stop it. The weapons are killing people left and right and destroying cities. Like, now is not a good fucking time for the last living Cetra to die, and especially because the worlds are merged now, there's absolutely no backup plan to create a new world where she can live. That will no longer be an option. She's not just dead now, she's dead now, and there's no bringing her back. And what the hell are they supposed to do now when the most vital person to saving the planet is gone? That's why it's even more tragic. And again, this elevates Cloud's character even more because he's going to be the one who steps up to the plate and rallies the party together to continue to fight to save the planet, despite all of the odds now being completely stacked against them. He's gonna look like the true leader he's supposed to be, far more than he even was in the original game. So to all the people concerned that this game is going to turn into a story about defying fate like Final Fantasy XIII, yeah, I'm not convinced that's really the direction they're going in. Fate is certainly a component to the story, but it's more of a mechanism of the lore than it is a central theme. Sometimes it's advantageous to stick to fate, and other times it's better to defy fate. Basically, Sephiroth and Aerith are just playing 5D chess with each other, using fate as a part of their strategy to give them the upper hand against one another. So when I first watched the ending, I entered the first stage, which is confusion. Then I moved to the second stage, which is clarity. Then I teeter-tottered back and forth between confusion and clarity as the more I started to understand about the story, the more questions I had. Now I've entered the third stage, which is contentment. I think that I understand the parts that I think we're supposed to know at this point and have accepted that some of the things we're not supposed to know yet. And from my perspective at least, it seems as though Square Enix is heading in the right direction for an absolutely stellar Part 3, and I can't wait to play it whenever it finally arrives. And since you made it all the way to the end of this video, and if you're looking for more content from me, you could do no better than to watch my actual review of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth itself right here.